What are you doing? Good. You guys ready to get started?
Yes, we're starting.
Okay. I'm just putting my contact information up here so that if you have any questions or you're ever like, you know, out in the field and instead of calling Brooke Dave, you can call me. If it's anything to do with the listing, I'm probably not a huge help. Like I was like, one time somebody called me like, where do I go to do this for a listing? I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
My name's Liz. I'm the lead buyer specialist for the Burnside team. So I started at KW December of 2015. And then I joined the Burnside team a few months after that as a showing agent, and then moved up to a buyer's agent, and then now I'm the lead buyer specialist. So we've got another buyer's agent, and then I also have a showing partner that I work with, and we are in the process of hiring a new admin. You probably need to look up. So yeah, that's a little bit about kind of my background. So from what I understand, this class is kind of like just talking about the day in the life of a realtor. So as you noticed, I was late. That's pretty common. No, I try not to ever be late, but I had a client that was submitting an offer, and they work in the restaurant industry, so they wake up kind of late. So I was just like literally waiting for them to finish signing so I could send off the offer because I only had until noon to get it in. So I just kind of thought, like, if you guys have anything specific that you're wanting to know, kind of why you came to this class, I can kind of put a parking lot over here of just some bullet points, make sure we cover all those things. Does anybody have anything that they were like hoping to get out of this class right up front?
Well, besides listening to your wisdom, this might not be part of the class, but being part of a team, in your opinion, what are the pros and cons?
Okay, yeah, I can definitely talk about that. Anything else?
Do you think going over like, I don't even have a good question. So the contracts and the addendum come as a bundle, and maybe just explaining more on what it means to counter versus addendums, like.
There is actually, I can definitely briefly touch on that, but there is a contracts class that happens once a month too. I think, I actually don't, oh no, this month it's actually Linda that's teaching it, and it's in my calendar, so let me tell you what that is. Cause that one's a really good one, cause they'll be going over like basics of like certain things, and then if there's specific questions that you're running into, but if we have time, I can definitely pull up a purchase contract, pull up an addenda kind of shape. Cause it's really hilarious, but counter offers still confuse me. Even though I've been doing this for so long, cause most of the time I'm not the one writing a counter offer. So it always takes me a little bit of thinking to actually figure out what I'm trying to do. But she teaches that class, let me think. Oh, it is on Tuesday, the 24th at noon. So there's a contracts class the 4th Tuesday of every single month. So if you just want to put that in your calendar, and that's actually a really great segue, because one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about what it was like when I was brand new, and then what it's like now, so you guys can kind of see the differences of how things change. And that was probably one of the biggest things. It was like, so I'll talk to you a little bit about my schedule in a minute, but I was very proactive. Every time that education training calendar came out, I put those things in my calendar and I treated them like an appointment. Like even when I was brand new, if say a buyer wanted to go look at a house or somebody else wanted to schedule an appointment with me, I'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm not available until, because I knew how important it was to make sure I was educated, trained properly, and made sure I know what I was doing. So I would definitely just, like I said, watch that training calendar, and anytime you see something, and if you're ever curious, like you're not really sure what the class is, like there are tons of people around here that would be happy to explain it to you. I help actually on the ALC, which is the Agent Leadership Council. I help actually create that education and training calendar too. So if there's ever anything you're like, gosh, I really wish we had this, we are open. We always want to make sure that we're actually putting things on there you guys want to go to. So I'll just put just contract basics if we have time. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about?
I have a question. We have coordinators with that, with us a lot, but I like to know everything in case if they go on vacation, if we get sick, and then I'm hostage, because I don't know what I'm doing. Right now, and I did it before, but who can I contact to show me how to enter a listing into MLS? I guess I could practice.
Yeah, I would just practice.
Practice.
I would imagine that there's somebody at the MLS that can help you.
So the MLS, yeah, I didn't have classes there.
Yeah, well, and I mean, what
That's a good idea.
I would do is just pull board.
Yeah, set up a time. Yeah,
And
yeah,
just
yeah.
call them and just say, hey, I just want somebody to walk me through how to input a listing on the MLS.
I think.
And I bet they have a resource that can.
Oh, yes, absolutely, thank you.
Anything else? Tell me a little bit about you guys. Are we all, I know you two are not brand new. Are you three all pretty new?
I'm the new director of agent services, so I'm an agent.
Okay, so you're just here kind of like, this is what our classes are like. Great. That's right, Delaney. Yes, okay. And then you're a showing partner, right? Okay.
I'm on the steering team.
Sweet. How long have you been with them?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Have you gotten anything under contract yet?
Yes.
Yay, exciting.
Wow.
It's, well, you may not know it, but it's chilled out a little bit. Like we're getting offers accepted a lot more often. So instead of it being like, well, we're on number 8, it's like, oh, let's just write a really good offer and get it. So, that's great. And then what about you?
New, like 2 months.
Cool. Okay. You done any transactions yet? Or? Okay, sweet. What field did you come from?
I was in nursing for many years.
Oh, cool. Nice. Why real estate?
I just want to do something totally different in business. But I knew I didn't want to go back to school for like 4 years. So like this kind of getting my footing and I can either stay or want something else.
Yeah. Cool. And then, sorry, I don't remember your name. Kaylin. I know, I was like, I know it's a C. It sounds like.
Kaylin and Cammy.
Yeah. But what field did you come from?
Education.
Okay. Like school, like high school?
So I worked at a university back in Chicago as an advisor.
Oh, cool. Okay. Sweet.
Yeah.
How come real estate?
Just something I've always said I wanted to do, and it's just like the biggest thing someone does for most of their life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so talking about kind of like the day in the life of a realtor. So when I was new, I went to Ignite and I followed exactly what that partner said to do at the time. So I came in every single morning. I had time blocks of at least 2, sometimes 3 hours, because I didn't have anything better to do. So I came in and I was hitting the phones for 3 hours almost every single day. Keeping track of my contacts, keeping track of appointments, going on first appointments, having no idea really what I'm doing, but you know, winging it enough. When I was brand new, I focused a lot on my database. And then for as far as my lead generating go, and I mean, all I was really doing is just calling people and letting them know I was in real estate. The kind of feedback that I was getting is like people knew me and trusted me. And when they did actually have a real estate transaction come up, I would say probably 50% of the time when I was new, I was actually getting people calling and saying, or texting, or responding and saying, hey, no, I do know somebody. Now, it didn't usually happen where they were calling me or reaching out to me, but if I called them and asked for business, I would usually get, oh, you know what, I just heard of somebody, and it was up to me to follow up and make sure that I was actually going through and setting an appointment. So that's what I did at first. And when I got through my database, I said, okay, now what? So then I started talking to other agents in the office and started just being like, hey, can I call around your listing? Can I call and invite people to your open house? Can I just call and tell people that there's a new house in the neighborhood? Everybody's like, yeah. And so that was a little bit of trial and error, right? Like I didn't really know how to provide value to people and I didn't really know what to say a whole lot of the time over the phone, but I was basically just calling and saying, hey, there's a new listing. And they're like, oh, well, how much is it? And I kind of realized like when people started asking questions, it's probably because they had a question about real estate. And so then I was able to, I mean, and most of those calls that I was doing in the beginning, it was like literally just adding them to a database, not really understanding why. I heard of this like 33 touch thing that I'm supposed to do marketing for, and I was like, just keep putting it into the database. I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know why, but that's what you're supposed to do. So that was a big chunk of my morning. The afternoons, I was always, and that's what I always liked about Keller Williams, is most of the time we schedule classes so that they're around 11, 12, 1 o'clock, so that you can go to your lead gen in the morning and you come do education after that. So that's what I did. Almost every single day I had some kind of training or education on my calendar. And then when you're brand new, everybody keeps calling you, title companies and lenders keep calling you, inviting you to lunch. And I was hungry. And so I said yes every single time. And I guess the thing is I never pictured it as like, I'm just going to lunch with this person. I always was like, at first I was like, what is it? I don't even know what title is. What's a title company? So just like really asking them more questions, like understanding the industry, kind of just getting that kind of like the language of real estate, right? Like understanding what different things are that people are talking about. And then in the later afternoons and evenings, that's when I kind of keep the time open to go on appointments. Now, first, I was literally, if anybody said yes to an appointment, even if I didn't know what I was doing, I was showing up, going on the appointment, and really just winging it. A lot of the time didn't even really have like a clear outline of what I was doing. Once I went and fumbled through a couple of appointments, I realized, okay, I need to actually know, I need to have an outline, I need to know what I'm doing. Like I remember when it was probably like my 3rd or 4th buyer consultation. It was with one of my really good friends. And she was just essentially like, look, we're gonna work with you. We know you're brand new. We know that it's gonna be a little bit messy, but like, we love you. We know that you're gonna do the best job for us. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. I can't believe you're trusting me this much, but thank you. This is great. And so it's funny because I went through, and I think just having that extra confidence of knowing that they were gonna work with me regardless of what I said. I went through the appointment, it was great, and then I left and I was like, something feels wrong, like I missed something. And then I was like, oh, that buyer broker agreement thing, I needed to end the appointment with getting a contract signed, and I didn't even really know to do that. So that's like I said, that's when I realized like, okay, I need to understand like what I'm doing on the appointments, like what is my goal, what is the purpose of these appointments, instead of just going and talking to people. So that's when I started practicing my buyer presentation and my seller presentation, and I scheduled it in my calendar. So at least once a week I was practicing both of those things. When I first started it, I would literally just do it in front of the mirror because I like didn't know what I was doing. After a while, I started talking to other agents that I was in Ignite with and was like, hey, can I do my presentation for you and you can do it for me? And so that was a good thing that got me really confident in knowing what I was saying. Then around that time, that's when so I had the one buyer that was still looking. I had another buyer who had just went under contract on a new construction home. So I was really excited. I'm 3 months in, I finally have my first deal, but it's new construction, so it's not gonna close, like, I don't even think it was that year. I ended up closing next year. So I'm like, okay, 3 months, I need a paycheck, what do I do? And that's when I kind of started deciding, okay, I'm 30 years old, I'm in this new industry. Do I want it to take 3 or 5 years to figure this stuff out? Or do I wanna, what can I do to fast track this? And that's when I started kind of opening up the idea of like, maybe joining a team and giving away some of my commission really is worth it. If I can see this many more transactions and like really understand how the business works. And all right, let me go back a little bit, because there was a situation, those home buyers that, I knew how to ask the questions, right? Hey, we're out looking at houses, you want to write an offer? Yes. Okay. I'm like, I don't even know how to write an offer, don't even know what Rexy is, like nothing. And so then I remember, I don't remember what the question was that I asked, but I had a question about this contract that I was writing. And I was like, okay, I know who some of the top producers are in the office. I'm gonna ask these 3 people the question. And all 3 of them gave me a completely different answer. And I was like, okay, so now what do I do? And so then that's when it became clear to me that like real estate is, I mean, there's so much you can learn, but it's also, there's a lot that's just experience, and you have to talk to people that you trust. And at this point, like I knew all those guys were top producers, but I didn't really know who I could trust. So that was kind of like the first light bulb that went, maybe this team thing would be a good idea for me. Anyways, fast forward, and then I'm kind of doing all the things and I'm getting business, but it's not fast enough, so I decide what's a faster way to do this. So I had been watching the Stern team and I've been watching the Burnside team. They were kind of the main two teams in the office at the time when I joined. And I really liked how the Burnside team was small, and I felt like, because I had come from owning cell phone accessory kiosk and always being an entrepreneur and doing my own thing. And I liked the idea of getting in with somebody who was small, who didn't have everything perfect and all figured out, but I would be working with some people that I trusted and liked the way that they did business. And so that's when I basically started interviewing for the position of the Burnside team. And they hired me, and like I said, I went on to start as a showing partner and grew out of that role pretty quickly into a buyer's agent. But I just remember being on that team the first 30 days of showing homes and answering questions for clients, like just really, being a realtor. I learned more in that 30 days than I ever did in the first 3 months. So at that point, I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I needed. And I remember too, it was kind of funny because when I joined them, I was like, I'll work with them for a year. I'll figure out how this real estate thing works, then I'm just gonna go off and do it by myself. Well, I remember about 3 or 4 months in, they were making it so good for me that I was like, oh my God, these guys are amazing. Like, we have some really great systems. Yes, we have room for improvement, but like, this is pretty sweet setup. Like, I'm getting clients, I'm doing the business, and they're making it all very easy for me. So that's, and what's been really interesting too about my journey with the team is like, what was a huge value add for me in the beginning is not now. There's different things, there's things that have changed, but what's been really cool is Cameron, the owner of the Burnside team, he keeps changing the value. Like when I start kind of getting into this position where I've outgrown this particular value, it's like, okay, well, what are we gonna do next? Okay, what else are we gonna do to make sure that you're still getting value from the team? So that's been really cool to kind of be on that journey, because like before it was like, I just want to work with people, I just want leads, and I want somebody to ask questions to that I know. Well, now it's come to the point where it's like, okay, I know how to get leads, I know how to talk to buyers, I know how to convert, I know how to do almost everything, with real estate. But now it's like, okay, now I want to build my investment portfolio, and I want to understand that and talk that language and be able to really build wealth through real estate instead of just having it as a job. So that's been really cool on my journey. So yeah, anyways, going back, that's kind of what my daily life used to be like, it was like, wake up in the morning, I usually did some exercise, lead generating, office, free lunches, and then or an education, and then I'd go on appointments. I also made the decision early on, because again, like I was 30 years old getting into a new career, and I was like, okay, and I just kind of was always noticing, like, what are some of the habits of the people that I notice are really successful? And I remember so at the time it was Linda Birch that was my lead buyer specialist. So she was kind of my essential like trainer and everything at first. And every like once a month we would do these things called cash talks. And it would kind of talk about different things like what's working, what do you feel like you still need to know, like where can I help you? And one of the questions she would always ask is, what have you noticed it takes for a successful agent in this business? And I remember a few months in, I was like, don't eat, don't sleep, don't poop even, like just work all the time, like that's what it takes. And so it was funny because that over time evolved for me. You start realizing like, no, they seem so busy and so in their zone because they're very focused. Like the time that they're here, they're not off, doing all these other things. They're focused on their job so that then when they get home at night with their family, they can actually be focused on that. They can take vacations. And it became very clear to me after a while, like, because I was always very much like, yeah, I want to have free time and I want to make my own schedule. And that's why I got into real estate, But then I kind of realized like, no, it's actually very structured and very scheduled. And the more scheduled you are, the more freedom you get. So that was kind of a cool mind shift throughout the time. So yeah, I mean, that was, and so kind of going on that note, I remember that first year, maybe even 2 years, I had a talk with my husband and I was like, look, because because we were very active, like we're both high I personalities. We love to do all the things. We love to entertain. We love to go to any birthday party, event, anything like that. And it's funny because Cameron always teases me like, oh, not their birthday party, because I go to one like once a week. But so that was one thing that up front, I was like, look, I kind of realized like if I'm willing to put in some really good time in the beginning of this, in a few years, I won't have to do that anymore. I'll be able to say, sorry, I can't do that because I have this event. And so that was one thing that was very clear to me. Like I didn't really take any vacations. I never like, if there was an event that my family was doing, if it was really important, I would make sure that I took the time off for it. But if it was like, you know, another birthday dinner or another, you know, just friends gathering or whatever, like anything like that, I kind of just always had it in my head, like I would pencil it into my calendar, but I would be like, look, if an appointment comes up or a buyer or a seller or anything comes up to do with work, like that's gonna be my priority for the first year or two. And that was kind of like, I went into it knowing that, and I think knowing that in the beginning that, hey, if I do these things up front and have freedom later, has made it a lot better, because now I've been in the business for 5 years. And it's like a majority of my calendar isn't real estate, and I'm not dropping everything to go on this appointment. It's like, hey, I can see you on Tuesday or Thursday at 5. Like those are the 2 days that I have that are after hours days. And it's like, it works, you know, and I like I said, I think I set myself up really well for that up front, because I took the time to make sure I was really building a strong database and really educating myself to make sure I understood all the ins and outs of the business, so that then later I could actually have more freedom. Sorry, that's so yeah, that's kind of, so now my business has evolved a lot into, I became a new mom 8 months ago. So that was a really interesting time, like while I was pregnant. So when I was pregnant, it's the middle of the pandemic, and I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna work a ton, because what else am I gonna do? So I had my biggest year ever during the middle of the pandemic. I think I sold like 43 units. I think before that I was maybe like 32 units or something like that. And I essentially did it by myself. I kind of had a part-time showing assistant that would help occasionally, but I was out showing all the homes and doing all the things, because again, like what else was I gonna do? And so then when it came to setting goals for 2021, and you know, I knew I was having my baby in December of 2020. And one of the biggest things that me and my husband had always talked about is like, we didn't want somebody else raising our kid. Like we wanted to, we're gonna have kids, we're gonna raise them, we're gonna be the ones they learn from and stuff like that. And so I was like, well, how does this look like? Like I'm used to working nonstop, you know, 9 to 9 every single day. And then Saturdays was like the one day that like maybe I'd take off the evening if it wasn't a crazy day of offers, and I'd take off Sundays. And so I was like, gosh, what is my life gonna be like? So it was really weird to kind of start deciding like, okay, how many transactions do I wanna do? And like, it was hard to really kind of work the goals backwards, because like I said before, work was my whole life and I didn't do too much else. So what we kind of decided to do, because A, I'd never had a baby before, and B, like, we didn't really know what the market was gonna do. I said, you know, we're gonna have to just kind of take it quarter by quarter. So it's like we set quarterly goals instead of a yearly goal. And then when we got through second quarter, I went, okay, I think I feel comfortable saying that I can commit to doing 25 transactions this year. And so I'm right on track for that, which is cool. And now that I've been tracking like my numbers for so long, like I know when I'm a little bit behind, I can already see it, and then I know how to pick up my activities. So right now I'm like I'm 3 buyers behind. Yeah, I'm probably gonna be 2, hopefully by the end of the day. I'm 2 buyers behind for my goal for this year, which I mean, it's only August, and you're like, why are you already thinking about the end of the year? But you have to think that far ahead, or you never have time to catch up. And so for the last 2 weeks, I've been doubling up on, so I was maybe doing lead generation for 3 hours a week when I came back from having a baby. Like maybe an hour, a couple of days a week when I was coming to the office. And now I'm like, okay, now I need to double down. I need to do at least 6 hours a week. And it's hard because I have to sit there and track and make sure I'm really doing it. But I notice every time that I'm actually tracking it, doing it, then all of a sudden the things start to show up. So that's been a huge thing, like going from producing like 40+ houses a year to like 25, and making it so that family's more a priority. Like that was a really big mindset shift. But now that it's August, I've really kind of wrapped my head around that, and I feel a lot more comfortable. If you would have asked me in like March or April, I was panicking because I'm like doing my quarterly taxes, and I'm like, I only closed 4 deals this quarter. I was like, holy crap, I can't believe that. Like, this is scary, this is insane. I'm not gonna have any money. And then I just started realizing like, okay, just have to budget more now. You have to like pay attention to your expenses. You can't just go to any lunch and dinner that everybody wants you to. If you want to have long-term wealth, you know, so I got to save money for the investing and stuff like that. So that's kind of like how my life has changed and evolved over the 5 years. And the cool thing is, for me, after about the 2nd year, I remember the day very clearly. That's when my phone rang. And so he was like, Liz, I have somebody that wants to buy a house. And I was like, wait, what? You're just calling me and telling me you have somebody that wants to buy a house. Like, this is so cool. And I remember it just kept happening. Like, I didn't have to always be the ones calling and bugging them. They all of a sudden started calling me. And so that happened about year 2. And then year 3 and year 4, it was like, I definitely didn't do as much outgoing lead generation, like I wasn't trying to build the database as much, so I was more focusing on just doing my SOI, doing a lot more events. I was doing some open houses here and there, but I wasn't like going outside of my sphere to do open houses, like for people in the office. I was just like, hey, if it's one of my clients that I love and I want to pick up buyers in that area, I'll totally do an open house. If not, I'm gonna give an opportunity to somebody else in the office. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell, and I just talked a lot and didn't really give anybody chances to ask any questions. So, have any questions about any of that? Let's go over any of that.
When you mentioned about putting money, for the quarterly taxes, I guess I could ask my accountant that, I have put money aside, because, but I have not actually filed every 2 months, am I gonna get, am I doing this answer now? And I'm gonna go get penalty?
So it depends on how much money you make. So when I first got into real estate, I think for the first 2 years, I wasn't required to do a quarterly thing. It depends on your income level. So once you hit a certain income level, I think you're kind of required to do a quarterly payment, but at the same time, like, I know people who make way more money than I do and they do not do a quarterly payment, but they do get a penalty. And the way that for them, the way that they've structured things, the penalty that they pay at the end of the year because of the tax savings they've been able to write off, makes sense for them to not pay that quarterly. So it's a really good thing to talk to your accountant and make sure you're making a strategy, but I do remember early not paying quarterly, but I always saved for it, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
What I do, hopefully the office isn't hating me for saying this, because this is what I do, and I remember it was really confusing at first, but now it's really easy. So every single time that I get a DA or a paycheck, I have 30% that goes to a savings account, and then the rest goes to money checking.
Yeah.
And so then what I used to do is at the end of the quarter, I would pay my taxes, and I always had extra because 30% is way more than what you actually end up paying. I always had extra, and then I would take out whatever fund money was, and I would go on a vacation, or I'd do that fund improvement
I'll
project.
save it for the next quarter.
See, no, I never did that in the beginning. Now I do. Now I don't ever, I just keep saving that money, and then at the end of the year, if there's anything left over, then I put it into like an investment account.
Yeah, good.
But yeah, that was one thing that I did early on that I was like, if I don't even know money's there, I definitely spend it.
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful, and I still do that. Good. What else?
Do the pros and cons of,
Yeah, so I think I kind of talked about a lot of the pros. Like the biggest thing for me was like just being on a fast track system to get lots of people and understand the ins and outs of the business, talk to people that I knew for sure knew what they were doing, that I trusted, that had integrity in the business. Not that in this office, I feel like 99.9% of our agents are somebody you can totally trust, work in integrity, but there still are just regular humans, you know what I mean? There's still people who do things that maybe aren't necessarily ethical. So for me, like having somebody that I knew was always going to be ethical and doing the right thing and being able to ask them for advice was huge. Let's see, some other pros, like I said, is like, I mean, I work under somebody who has a gigantic investment portfolio and who manages his own properties. And I had one investment and I'm like, have some property manager. And he's like, why are you paying somebody to do this? If I can do this with, 20 plus rentals, why can't you do it? And I was like, you're right. So I just actually took over my own rental. It started this month actually. And it's funny because I have all these brand new fears. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if they don't pay their rent? What if this breaks? What if that breaks? And I'm like kind of panicking a little bit. I'm like, I don't think I want to be a landlord. What was I thinking? And then I'm like, well, you've already been a landlord for 2 years, so you're already doing it. And then I just kind of thought about like anything that happens, like you can fix, like everything's gonna be fine. And like you want to build that long-term wealth. Like these people are literally paying off debt for you so that then you have long-term wealth, like you have properties in a way to retire later. So yeah, like I said, like I think the people that you're working with is huge. I mean, also the amount of accountability I get, right? And it's been cool because it's fluctuated and changed throughout the years. Like it used to be like, you're in the office every day, making this many calls and this many contacts, and that's what I needed. And now it's like, okay, what do you want your business to look like? Okay, let's work that backwards. Now, how do you want me to hold you accountable? So that's probably been the, some of the bigger things for me is just like the education and the accountability. As far as cons go, it's kind of hard for me because I've had such a good experience working on a team. I think that most people would say like paying split commissions can be a con. But again, going back to your value, if you're seeing where your money is going and like it's putting value back into you and putting value back into your business, like, what's the problem? Most agents, if you're running your business right, you're only keeping 40% of your profits anyways. So it's like, if you can be on a team and maybe you're keeping a little bit more than that. And for me, like, I don't have to make all the hard decisions of like, how are we gonna spend our marketing dollars? How are we gonna hire an admin? Who's gonna hire the admin? Like, who's gonna train the admin? All these things, like, I just show up and do my job. And that's what I really liked. But again, I mean, that's my team specifically. Other teams are not ran that way, so.
And that's why your coordinator do a lot of things for you. But that coordinator works for you with some other people.
Yeah, so like we always have, we call our admin, like, okay, so I call our admin the glittery glue that holds everything together.
Yeah.
So not only do they sit here and do like the transaction coordination and babysitting and making sure, but here's the thing, usually a transaction coordinator, like they're not babysitting and checking deadlines and making sure you're not missing anything, they're literally sending paperwork back and forth.
Yeah.
Which is great, because then you make sure you're doing everything right and you're getting the right forms, you're still very much in charge of like making sure everything's done. And so our admins are like literally like, hey, your deadline's in 2 days, what do you need? Hey, your deadline's in 1 day, what do you need? Hey, you still haven't told me what you need for this deadline, it's in 4 hours, you know?
Yeah.
And then like when we would do our client appreciation events, like they were handling so much of back end stuff that like all I had to do was invite people to show up, like,
Yeah.
you know? So a really high end admin's can do so many things that, and the thing is too, is it's like they're freeing up time for you, so it's like all I have to do is find clients and negotiate deals, like that's all I have to do.
But you write your own contracts.
Someday, I wanna not write my own contract, so I wanna be able to call a person and be like, hey, here's the details, thanks. But they do the addenda, right? So like my job is writing the contract, negotiating the offer, once it's accepted, and we need simple addenda going back and forth and leave it all out. Yeah, as far as like, yeah, because that's, because it's funny, because when I was looking for my, you know, we were showing partner, it's worked for me for a little while now. I was actually considering, I'm like, do I really need somebody to go show homes? Or do I need somebody who can write contracts for me? And I decided just because of where I was at with having a baby, that I was like, no, I need somebody to actually be able to physically go drive places and I'm gonna have to handle the paperwork. But someday I'd like to have somebody who doesn't direct all the places, writes the paperwork, and I'm literally just, I'm the pilot, right? I'm just the face, I just talk to the people and I look like I'm doing all the things, but I'm really just the face.
So this is what you're thinking here. If you pass that liability, because you're liable for everything else. If you give somebody else the power to write your contract, if something goes wrong, you're ultimately.
Yeah, and so you have to be willing, you have to be willing to inspect and accept.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're totally right, like, I mean, realistically, if you're having somebody write your contracts, you should actually, especially if your name's on them, you should be the one looking them over before they ever get sent through signature. And I mean, for instance, like on all the addenda that we write, that is absolutely true. Every once in a while, like, you know, with this market being so crazy, if I'm out on the road and I need an offer submitted within 45 minutes and I can't do it,
Yeah.
like I can call the admin in for a favor, be like, hey, can you do this? But they always get nervous because they have to send it to me. We have to make sure everything looks right. But
Yeah.
I've already looked through it and then they send it for signatures.
Very good.
Very good point though, because you have to be very, you can't just like hands off,
Yeah,
like you have to actually still be checking your details and making sure they're not. messing things up. Any other questions? Yeah.
So, just to get your take on it, how do you write a winning offer right now? Like, what are the things you include and like maybe things you don't include that are kind of crazy right now?
Sure. It really depends on the buyer situation, right? And one thing that I've noticed, also being on the other side of the transaction, working as a listing agent, is it is still so important to just call people. Because I can't tell you how many offers we've gotten recently where the buyer's agent doesn't call us. Their offer is the only offer. They're going 30,000 over asking. They're waiving all their contingencies. They're getting non-refundable earnest money upon acceptance. All these crazy things, and like Cameron and I just laugh because we're like, you would have just called me. You could have had to do due diligence. You could have had some contingencies. You didn't have to do non-refundable. You could give us offer asking price and you would have gotten it. So it's been very clear to me because sometimes like I get into that mode where I'm like, I'm not even gonna call them. They're not gonna tell me anything anyways, blah, blah, blah. But then I get the reminder of like, no, if you call them, you're gonna get a lot more information than anybody else. And you get shocked at how often you still hear that agents never call before they write an offer. And like, it's just mind blowing to me. It's like, I've probably 1% of the time, and it's, you know, a discount company that we won't talk about. That's about the only time that I usually don't even try to call because I know that they're not gonna answer. And here's the thing, I make an attempt, right? I call, I email, I text. 99% of the time, I get a text 8 hours after it's gone under contract. Oh, hey, we're under contract. I'm like, no shit, I can see that on the MLS, right? I swear. No kidding, I can see that on the
Yeah.
MLS. So, you know, but other than that, like, even if it's a different discount broker or something else, like, I'm always calling and I'm hounding them and I'm pleasantly persistent, right? Like, I call them, I text them, I wait. I call them, I text them, I wait. And like, my texts are like, hey, I just want to talk to you about an offer on this. When would be a good time to talk? And then I call and text. Most of the time, by the time, like, if I call or text them 3 or 4 times and they haven't answered, most of the time they're picking up the phone. I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, look, I know you're busy. I'm not trying to drive you nuts. I just know that you were busy and I just want to try to make this as convenient as possible for you. You got 5 minutes? Yes. Okay, cool. Here's what we're thinking. As far as winning offers goes, like, it really depends. Because I mean, I just got an offer accepted with a 2-week due diligence. Just kidding. It was like a 9-day due diligence. We got closing costs paid for by the seller. It was an FHA offer. That hasn't happened in a long time. Yeah. Here's the caveat. I noticed that house has been on the market for 13 days. And I'm looking at it, we looked at another one up the street, and I'm like, it's probably just a touch overpriced. And so I talked to the seller's agent, hey, how's your activity been? Oh, we're not getting a lot of showings. Okay, I have an FHA buyer that wants to write a really great offer, but you know, what do you think your clients are willing to do? Anyways, we get to talking, and I discover he's about to talk to them about price adjustment. And so I'm like, okay, so I know we've got some room, right? I mean, he's a good agent. I know this agent. They're gonna drop at least $10,000, right? Like, at least. And so I'm like, okay, let's ask for $7,000 for his closing. So then I submit the offer, I call back, hey, so here's what we're sending. And he's like, yeah, I just don't know if they're gonna pay any closing costs. I'm like, yeah, but you're getting ready to do a price reduction, right? Yeah, that was gonna be our next conversation if we didn't get an offer. And he's like, so I'm like, so why don't you just spin it to them, tell them that it's this. And hey, you're only gonna have to give 7,000 instead of 10,000 or more. You don't know because you haven't gone there yet. And he's like, you're right, I'm gonna totally do that. So we did, they did counter us back, and we ended up only getting 5,000 for closing, but hey, if we're getting anything in this market, it's chill. Now on the flip side, the offer that I just submitted is in Orem. For whatever reason, Orem is still on absolute fire, it seems like. This house was listed at 416. It's this weird online bidding system. Has anybody dealt with that? You dealt with that? Oh my God, it's so confusing. If you ever did run into it, just don't tell your clients anything on the back end. Just tell them what the purchase price is, because that's where I went wrong, because we were all confused. I'm talking to the agent like 10 times trying to understand how I'm supposed to explain this to my client. He's like, get the idea out of your head that the buyer doesn't pay commissions, because they do. It's in the purchase price. And I was like, okay, yeah, I guess I see that. Anyways, so at the end of the day, we ended up offering, so it's like this bidding system where you basically find out if you're in the top 2 or 3 bids, right? And then you submit a purchase contract after that. So we ended up at the purchase price of like $479 or something like that, from $416. This is after I tell my clients, I just got an offer accepted with the closing costs, and we're not having to go crazy bounce over. And they're like, okay, so we're at $479, and now we have to decide if we're really gonna write a purchase contract, right? So we had gone through, and before we had gone this far, we had already run comps. It's definitely worth $475. It's worth $475 all day. It might even be worth $500. We weren't really sure, but we decided it's easily worth $475, so we can at least go somewhere around that neighborhood. So I relooked at comps again today, and they're like, gosh, we're going 70,000 over the asking price. Is that really like what we should be doing? And I'm like, I mean, you guys looked at the comps. There's stuff that's not even as, so this is like an older, like, but immaculate house. Like, probably haven't been updated since the 90s, but like, they had, you know, these are the type of people that are changing their furnace filter every 30 days. Like, not, you know, there's nothing wrong with this house. It's, you know, built in the 70s. So anyways, we decided like, no, the house is definitely worth $475, but they were kind of, here's where it kind of got interesting. So then the seller's agent tells me, hey, there's an offer that's $3,000 more than yours. Now, if you want, I think it would be in your best interest to at least match that. He's like, but you know, your bid was accepted at the $479, and I'm like, okay. So my clients this morning decide, yeah, we're just gonna stick with the $479. So I'm like, hey, you really, like, $3,000 is not going to really change anything on your payment. I think it's definitely gonna still appraise. Like, are you sure that's what you really wanna do? They go back and forth, they call me back, okay, let's go for it. These guys, mind you, these guys have lost like 8 other offers. So they are sick of making offers. Like, they are professional writing offers. And the hard thing is they've written really competitive offers and they just keep getting out the cash. So anyways, they're like, what else do we need to do in this house list? So I'm like, look, this is kind of a weird bidding system. I don't want you to do any non-refundable earnest money upon acceptance in case I've missed something. I want to make sure we have at least a couple of days to get the escrow instructions, like understand exactly how everything works. So we call our inspector, we get a pre-scheduled inspection for Saturday at 7 a.m. We do a $5,000 earnest money deposit, all of it non-refundable at due diligence, we do the inspection. Let's see what else. We didn't ask for a home warranty. We showed that we were doing a 10% down payment. We have the lender calling, we wrote a letter to the sellers, like just kind of pulling out all the stops. So stay tuned. If you want to text me at 9 o'clock tonight, I should have an accepted offer. Actually, let me make sure.
In situations like this, what happens, well, if the appraisal comes in below the offer, the sellers would probably be willing to lower the price, right?
The
Is there
appraisal comes
understood?
in low.
Yeah.
Probably not in this market. And that's the thing, they have multiple people that are willing to pay about the same price as we are.
And pay the difference in cash.
And that's, I mean,
Yeah.
we're showing them
Yeah.
that we have a 10% down
Gotcha,
payment. They're, I mean, and that's what I always do with my buyers. It's like, hey, expect to pay what you offered, no matter what it appraises for.
Okay.
However, we didn't do, there's actually an appraisal addendum that makes it very clear as to what you're doing. We didn't do one of those. So it's like, if it doesn't appraise, it's kind of like a traditional transaction where you kind of go in and decide what everybody's going to do. It's a situation where I know the sellers are motivated, like they want to close quick, stuff like that. So I think if we end up with some kind of gap, hopefully it's one of those situations where we kind of meet in the middle. But I think if we have a gap, it's going to be so small that the seller should be like, you got, get us $5 grand out of your own pocket.
What's the name of that, this online bidding?
It's a EXP.
I have never done.
It's like home. I can't remember the website. It's like home. Yeah, it's really quite interesting. The agent has been very helpful throughout it all. Like I'm texting him like minutes before the bidding is ending, and he was really helpful. But he was also great.
And it's just a normal listing?
It's like an auction.
It is an auction.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
and so that's the other thing is like
So
we're
the-
agreeing to a
the
6%
highest bidder
commission,
gets-
but then his VAC was 2.5. I was like, wait, am I not getting 3%? He's like, oh, no, I have to pay fees for the auction. I'm like, I should pay that. I should pay 3%.
Yeah.
Let me show you, you were wanting to understand like contract basics. Let me show you an offer I just did where we did a counter offer. Sorry, while I'm doing this, any other questions or anything? Okay, I was like, just throw anything at me. We got like 13 more minutes. Oh, yeah. Okay, so. Okay, so let me show you this first. So this is where, this is on a transaction where I'm representing the seller. So this is the contract that we received. And it wasn't a very strong offer. So a couple of things, I'm just gonna kind of point these out to you, so if you guys are ever representing a seller and you're looking at these, and hopefully it will help you like when you're representing a buyer, like knowing little things you can do to just show them that you actually can do your job and you're confident. So right here, it's a $400,000 house, they're only giving me $1,000 for the state deposit, so that was the first thing that they didn't like. Then notice here, they just
Oh.
leave all this blank, and he writes, oh, we're doing a VA loan. I'm like, cool, so you have no money and you're doing a VA loan, great. Sell buyer's property is, so he does have a subject to sell, I'm like, great, there's another tick against you. Most of the other things are totally fine. But here's the funny thing too, we were only asking 400 and he offered us 430. We didn't have any other offers. So we could have totally made something work at the asking price, and here's the other thing too, is it is a VA loan, so the appraisers tend to be a little bit more strict, right?
Yeah.
Looking at comps, it's probably gonna appraise for like 420. But that's the thing is I have this detailed conversation with my client up front. I'm like, hey, you need to pretend like this house is gonna appraise for 400,000.
Yeah.
And you need to kind of just run all your numbers based on that price. I'm like, maybe 415 at most, anything above that, we're just gonna be stoked, it's extra money, right? He's like, okay, so we have that upfront conversation. And so, I mean, even the other day, he's telling me the house isn't going to appraise. I'm like, hey, stop with that negativity. I'm like, the appraiser just went out today, like, it's gonna appraise, it's gonna be fine. Because there's been a lot where I think it's not going to, and then it does, and then I think it's going to, and it doesn't. So anyways, that was an upfront conversation I had with my clients. It's like, hey, it's VA, they don't have to come in with a dime extra if they don't want to. But the whole thing that the agent sold
They
me
have
on,
to pay the closing costs, correct? And the VA,
the buyer pays.
that's what I mean. If I pays for the.
I mean, you can
closing
always
costs.
negotiate close to the cost, but they weren't asking us to pay on that. So anyways, they have a house to sell, and I look it up, I see that it looks like it's priced right, I looked up his previous listing, I figured he's got like $70,000 in equity. So I'm in the back of my mind, and I'm not really necessarily explaining this to my client, but in the back of my mind, I'm going, if this is a little bit short, we're gonna probably get pretty close, like we're gonna make up some difference somewhere. But again, I'm prepping my client for only getting 400,000, right? I'm like, do all your things that you're planning on doing based off that number.
If they can go above the asking price, why wouldn't they up their?
And that's a great thing, right? So I call the agent and I'm asking him all these questions. So again, this guy just sends me over offer line, doesn't call me, doesn't do anything. All he's texting me about is, hey, is it still available? Is it still available? Is it still available? And I think the reason why they waited to submit their offer was because they were getting the guy's condo on the market, because then I look and it's on the market that day and it looks like crap. Cause like he's moving, right? Like he's not ready, you tell him he's not ready for photos. Anyways, they sold it quick, it was under $200,000 condo, so that was kind of like receiving price. We're like, it's gonna sell, it'll be fine. So let's see, what else? Then they had deadlines in here that were pretty far out. I'm like, well, you're not really showing us that you're a serious buyer, because we received this offer like, let's see the date of it. We received it on the 30th of July. So they're giving themselves like 2 weeks for due diligence and forever for appraisal and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we gotta tighten those dates up too. Like, you gotta show us that you're serious, like, we gotta get some money out there, we gotta make sure you're really moving
What
forward.
kind of deadline do you think you submitted and could keep it in mind?
So in a traditional market, so I just remember, so the top line, seller disclosure, 7. Then the next line, 14, then the next line, 21, and the next line, 30. So 7, 14, 21, 30. That's kind of like the traditional.
Right.
Right now, I'm saying like 3 days for seller's disclosures, 7 days for due diligence, and then 21 and 30 for the rest.
So they
7,
need more
14,
time if it's a VHA loan.
VA, I always check with the lender, and really you're only looking at your financing just to make sure the VA appraiser can get out there. So yeah, anytime I'm doing like, it's funny because this seller is actually a VA buyer too, so that was another reason why he wanted to take a VA offer.
Oh,
He's like, let's just get that good voodoo out there, and
yeah.
what do you know, the first offer we wrote from him, he got accepted, so I think it was good, it was all good, you know, juju and everything out there, but. Yeah, so I called the lender and I said, hey, if I give you 3 weeks, is that enough time? It's like, that's plenty. Some lenders, they have not been the same with VA, so you always wanna just call. And I mean, on this deal, I called and talked to the lender, talked to him specifically about
Before you
deadlines.
finalize those dates.
Yep, yeah, so when you're representing the seller, you're also calling the lender. And one, it was funny because I had all this idea of all these questions I was gonna ask this lender, and then Cameron Birdseye gave me, he's like, just call him and say, what did he say, like, so tell me about this fire. He's like, most of the time they're gonna open up, they're just gonna tell you everything you wanna know anyways. It's like, but then if there's specifics, you go in, okay, how much money do they have, stuff like that, but I mean, this lender did exactly that. He's like, I've known him for this long, he's put in this many offers, blah, 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 and he just tells me everything about the client. I'm like, how much money do you get? He's like, ooh, he's pretty short on funds until he sells his house. I'm like, okay. I'm like, so do you think I could ask him for more for an earnest money deposit? He's like, probably not a lot. He's like, but I think you could ask him for a little bit more. So we bumped up the earnest money to $2,000. We shortened the due diligence deadline, and then we made them order an appraisal upon acceptance, basically.
Yeah.
So what we do here, so at the bottom of the purchase contracts, instead of just clicking acceptance, we're going to put counter offer. And then you have to put how many addendas. So we already have 2 addenda at the bottom of this offer, so we're on addenda number 3, right? So you have him sign everything throughout, sorry, this one's not the signed one, but he's signing, oh, no, sorry. He signs everything, we put everything as a counter offer. And that's pretty much it on this. Yeah, subject to sell, buyer's property, all that stuff. So
You have to
then,
make that, is that addenda 3, the changes that you made?
yep, so then on my addenda 3, I'll show you that now. So this right here shows you the change. So, because he put owner of record, because he's lazy. So we put Thomas Kennick as the seller. We changed the earnest money deposit, we made the due diligence deadline 10 days from acceptance, appraisal we do order within 24 hours, and then we excluded a couple of things, so we just wanted to make sure we're excluded. Hold on, I just remembered something that I only excluded, that's crap. Hold on, let me just look at something on here. Okay, perfect, so there's my other solution I was looking for. But yeah, so then that's all we're doing on the counter offer, you're putting counter offer instead of an addenda. Now say we're in the middle of a transaction, so for instance, right here, we have an addenda number 4 that's changing a couple of things. But this isn't a counter offer, this isn't an addenda. Or it's just an addendum, because we are doing, the property address is a change that the lender wanted us to make, and then we renegotiated so that the seller can keep possession for 72 hours. So that makes sense, now you kind of understand like the difference between a counter offer and an addendum.
So you just could add that without addressing it as
You
a
just
counter
know.
offer, you just
No,
adding that.
Yeah, it's just something that's being added, and most of the time, like especially because I usually work on the buyer side of the business, like 99, maybe 95% of the time, I'm just adding addenda to the contract, like I'm rarely doing a counter offer. When you're working on the selling side, I would imagine you're gonna do a lot more counter offers than just regular addenda. But I think you're still doing a majority of just addenda, you're not really countering most things. Because again, like if you're having an agent that picks up the phone and talks to you about things before you send things over, usually figure everything out and then it's just an addenda, so you're not having to counter something back on something. Now, once in a while, you get a client that's like, is gonna wanna counter anything that anybody says, so you're kind of coaching each other through that. It's like, hey, send me this, then we're gonna counter you back, because my client always wants to feel like they countered you, so. Does that kind of help? Okay. Anything else? We got just a couple minutes left.
No, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, good stuff.
Now, like I said, I know what it's like to be brand new and feel like, what's a rep C? What contract do I use? What addenda do I use? Like, what is an addenda? Where do I find the addenda? So if you ever, like, don't ever feel like you have a dumb question, like always, there's people here all over the place that want to help you. So I'm one of those people, you can always call or text me and I'm happy to help you anyway if I can. And I think it's good to find other people in the office, like, cause this might come as a shock, but like, I don't like live by myself anymore.
You should have one cheers for the book.
And sometimes, I mean, I think it's good, like I said, to have kind of like 3 people in the office that you really trust and think that they have a high integrity business that you can ask questions to. Because then you can't get Riverdale, or you can't get, your first choice, you've got other people that you can kind of go to. So keep coming to these kind of classes and you'll see the agents that you're like, okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. you guys need anything else, let me know. I don't know if I'm supposed to do something. different than that.
Oh, we're.
Oh, okay.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So. Now, we'll really have some questions and answers today. Yes, but I think I'm gonna make some calls to people that have the names and try to make appointments now. A little more busy, this one travels all the time, I have to catch it. So I'm trying to meet for this Saturday. Just to get inside.
On how
Yeah.